Classic Historical Tales presents Atlanta Shall Not Fall, John Bell Hood's Stand in 1864. Chapter 1, A Fateful Decision. By late July of 1864, Sherman's armies had flanked the Confederates repeatedly, inching closer to Atlanta's heart. Richmond's high command, already rattled, anticipated a withdrawal to preserve Hood's fighting strength. But Hood, emboldened by desperation and pride, issued a proclamation to his soldiers and citizens. This city shall not fall while a single musket can be fired. We shall defend Atlanta as our ancestors defended the Alamo, unto the last drop of Southern blood. Hood was sent to Atlanta to take over from Joe Johnston, who President Jefferson Davis did not have faith in leading a vigorous defense. The Army of Tennessee now had a bold leader. Would Hood try to keep his army intact and leave Atlanta, or hold Atlanta at any cost? General Hood first fortified the city's rail lines and downtown core. Buildings were repurposed as bunkers. The Georgia militia, wounded men, and even enslaved laborers were pressed into service to build redoubts. Ammunition was rationed. Artillery pieces were dragged from rooftops to basements. Atlanta became a fortress. Chapter 2. Sherman adjusts. Sherman was stunned. Hood had always been aggressive, recklessly so, but to turn Atlanta into a redoubt defied military sense. "He means to sacrifice his army for symbolism," Sherman wrote in a letter to Grant. "Let him." Instead of launching frontal assaults, Sherman began a calculated siege, much like Grant at Vicksburg. Union forces cut off rail lines and bombarded civilian quarters with relentless artillery fire. Supplies dwindled, fires erupted, civilians suffered as the city began to rot from the inside out. Northern newspapers praised Sherman's strategy but warned of a looming humanitarian catastrophe. Lincoln's advisors feared the public relations nightmare of dead Southern civilians published weeks before the 1864 election. Chapter 3. Confederate Resolve and Civilian Agony. Inside Atlanta, the mood was grim and defiant. Hood's speeches rallied troops, but starvation and disease spread rapidly. Desperate families boiled shoe leather for soup. Confederate newspapers, smuggled in by courier, painted Hood as a heroic Spartan. In truth, Atlanta was dying. Churches turned into field hospitals. Every able-bodied male carried a weapon. Teenage boys were drafted into last-ditch units. Hood himself began wasting from infection, a wound from the Battle of Peachtree Creek festering. General Hardee urged evacuation, but Hood refused. "This city is the heart of Georgia, and Georgia is the heart of our cause." Chapter 4. Political shockwaves as August turned to September, Atlanta still held. Northern newspapers printed daily casualty lists. Humanitarian groups begged for ceasefires to allow civilians to evacuate, but Hood denied all requests. "Leave and morale collapses," he warned. A personal diary entry of Ulysses S. Grant, October 1864. "No general who loves his army would bury it beneath brick and fire. Yet Hood seems content to let his men starve so long as the flag remains raised." President Lincoln faced a storm of criticism. Democratic challenger George B. McClellan, bolstered by anti-war Copperheads, surged in the polls. His message, "Let the South go, end this slaughter." Sherman, frustrated, wrote to Lincoln urging permission to storm the city and end the stalemate. Lincoln hesitated. He needed a decisive victory, not a Pyrrhic one. Chapter 5. The election of 1864, Hood continued to hold Atlanta through early November, despite worsening conditions. The city was starving, but not broken. His refusal to yield became a powerful symbol across the South, and a damaging one in the North. On Election Day, November 8, 1864, Lincoln lost both the popular and electoral vote. George B. McClellan was elected the 17th President of the United States on a platform of negotiation and national healing. Chapter 6. The Armistice of 1865. Within weeks of taking office in March 1865, President McClellan began secret talks with Confederate diplomats in Canada. Weary from years of bloodshed and economic collapse, both sides agreed to a ceasefire. On June 2, 1865, in Louisville, Kentucky, an armistice was signed between the United States and the Confederate States of America. The terms were controversial. The Confederacy retained its independence but agreed to gradually abolish slavery over 20 years. The border remained fluid, with West Virginia, eastern Tennessee, and parts of Louisiana opting to remain under Union control. Texas became a gray zone of lawless autonomy. Epilogue: a fractured continent. John Bell Hood did not live to see the peace. He died from gangrene in a Confederate field hospital in December 1864, his name already spoken as legend. But in the post-war South, he became a martyr, a symbol of noble defiance. Statues were raised in his name across Georgia and Alabama. The war had ended, but peace proved elusive. The United States, having lost over 750,000 men, entered a period of introspection and economic instability. The Republican Party fractured. The South, meanwhile, clung to a bitter, hollow victory. Though independent, it was diplomatically isolated, economically devastated, and morally compromised. By the 1880s, tensions rose again. Disputes over tariffs, railroads, and river access created the specter of a second war. Meanwhile, abolitionists and black resistance movements grew in the Confederacy, turning cities like Richmond and Memphis into flashpoints of internal unrest. Hood's stand in Atlanta reshaped the war, not by delivering victory, but by extending the pain. Two nations emerged from the ashes, neither whole, and both haunted by the ghosts of what might have been. Thank you for listening to Classic Historical Tales. Subscribe so you don't miss another episode.